Revolutionary salute, power to the people. This is Malik Alim reporting for the Underlocking Key, new state chairman for the Noble Young Lords Party. So this segment of Underlock Key, right, is political activism for prisons for women. All right. So all right. It says, in this issue of Underlock Key, set out to report on revolutionary organizing in women's prison in the United States. Self-determination for the internal semi-colonies won't be won by males alone, and yet our subscriber list is overwhelmingly male. As a prison organizing group, we wanted to look at what is our role in resolving contradictions along gender lines. In our struggle toward national liberation and an end to American imperialism, the lumpen class has a strong training in male chauvinism, and prisons are an even more extremely masculine environment. If we are going to contribute to the resolution of gender contradictions, we need to consciously put effort into it. We solicited articles from many current and former prisoners on this topic, but in the end, we received very little response. This coincides with our overall reach into women prisons. While about 7% of the population in prison is locked up in women's prison, we do not have close to 7% of our subscribers located in these institutions. In these articles, we will explore the current state of imprisonment of females and some potential reasons for a limited reach and lower political environment in institutions for women. All right. So Mindways International Movement has long talked about gender oppression faced by prisoners in the United States. Gender is distinct from class and nation and located within leisure time activities. Usually, gender oppression is something suffered by biological females, but in prison, where the vast majority of the population is male, we'll still see significant gender oppression. When male prisoners are sexually assaulted by guards, this is gender oppression because it's based in leisure time. But there are other aspects of this gender oppression, including the American legacy of lynching new African men for supposedly raping white women, which is an example of white females having gender power over new African males. So it's not so straightforward as just looking at biology to determine who is gender oppressed. And as on the streets, gender interacts with nations to complicate the situation in prisons. Write in for more analysis on this topic from past issues of Underlock Key. Now, females make up 18.4% of all people under the supervision of adult correctional system on jail and probation. There are 6.7% of federal prisoners, 7.2% of state prisoners. The higher percentage of females in jails and on probation reflects the lesser severity and shorter sentence compared to males. Because our reach is mainly in prisons, that is what we will focus on here. Many have commented on the dramatically increasing female prison population in the United States, especially as the recent growth rate was so much higher than the rate for males. Between 1995 and 2005, the number of male prisoners grew 34%, while the number of female prisoners grew 57%. Overall, females went from 11% of all arrests in 1970 to 26% in 2014. However, the United States prison population peaked in 2009 and has been dropping slowly since then. The total change between 2004 and 2014 was a 1% drop in prison population. Over that same period of male prison population dropped 1.2%, while the female prison population increased 1.4%. Since 2004, the number of females in prison has bounced up and down every few years, with a peak in 2008, a drop from 2008 to 2012, and then an increase in 2013 and 2014. The dramatic increase in incarcerated females prior to 2004 seem to have leveled off, and there are no clear trends since 2004. Now, what we can conclude from the numbers above is that the imprisonment rate for females is growing faster than the rate for males, but the growth is relatively slow in recent years, and the overall number of females in prison is so much smaller than the number of males that it would take many years of significant growth to get close to equal incarceration rates between males and females. So it is still true that when we talk about prisons in the United States, we are overwhelmingly talking about prisons for men. That's true. So, new Africans and Chicanas are disproportionately locked up and compared to white females, twice the rate for new Africans and 1.2 times for Chicanas. But these statistics mean that a much larger proportion of people in female prisons are white than the male prisons, which locks up new African at almost 6 times the rate of white males and Chicanos at more than twice the rate actual rates of whites. And in female prisons, the disparity has been decreasing in recent years, with incarceration of white females increasing at a faster pace than other nationalities. Is this a college paper or an article? All right. Below, we examine two possible explanations for mindless international movement: limited reach into facilities for women. One, we are not doing a good job addressing issues that are important to this population, and so they just not interested in working with us. Two, females in prison are less political than males in prison. If the former is true, we hope that this underlying key will inspire readers to write to us and tell us what we're missing. We do, however, see some solid evidence that the explanation is a lack of political interest among female prisoners. We need to consider what might cause female prisoners to be less interested in our work than their male counterparts. Those who do write to us often comment on the complete lack of interest among their fellow prisoners. And while we hear this plenty from men institutions, we also hear many more stories from the men's prisons about activism and interest. In addition, some of the women who write to us are transgender and held in male institutions, which this experience contributing greatly to their political awareness. Based on our experience and what evidence we can find from studies in prisoners, we believe that women are less likely to be locked up long term, less likely to be put in solitary confinement, more likely to have family waiting for them on the outside, and less likely to have been active members of a lumpen organization prior to or during their term. These are mostly conditions of women in general in the United States, and so reasonable assumptions to make. We are by no means suggesting that imprisonment of females in this country is fear of abuse or anything other than a product of a system built for social control. But females who are swept up in the net of widespread incarceration are often not the primary targets of the system. The stats on nationality make this clear. So one might argue that gender oppression in women's facilities is scarring people locked up there into unwillingness to reach out to MIM. However, we see that increased repression in men's prisons generally result in increased political interest. We get many letters describing threats resulting from political activism or even just educating, leading people to greater interest in men's facility. And historically, on a global scale, greater oppression has led to greater resistance by nation, class, and gender. Overall, we think the lower percentage of people in women's facility reaching out and getting involved with mindless international movement and the No Young Laws Party validate our theory about what lead prisoners to becoming politicized. Significant factors include solitary confinement, lumpen organization involvement, significant repression, censorship, and conditions of abuse. Essentially, repression breeds resistance as long as the repression isn't so extreme that prisoners face total censorship or health conditions so bad that they are unable to function. We regularly hear that widespread access to TV and other privileges really do not bind prisoners out of political interest and activism. This is not a surprise in a country of wealth and privilege where the vast majority of the population enjoys petty bourgeois lifestyle. Further supporting this theory is our anecdotal experience that trans women are interested and active behind bars. They're more revolutionary minded. We know they face significant repression distinct from the general prison population. So it is not surprising that trans prisoners are driven to political awareness and activism. So unique challenges in women's prisons. While material conditions to analyze above play a role in the appeal of proletarian-led communist revolution to any population, we also need to look at our own attempts or lack of to organize with this population. Mindless international movement has not made a concerted effort. Neither has Noble Young Lord's Party to connect the struggle for national self-determination with struggles in women's prison. With this underlying key, we hope to spark that conversation. With that said, we need to look at what unique challenges are faced by people locked up in facilities for women. This will help determine if we are not addressing the issues that are important to these prisoners. So the battle to maintain or regain custody of children is one issue more prevalent in facilities for female prisoners. In 2006, and other studies suggest this number is pretty constant in recent years. More than 65% of females in state prisons and 55% of males in state prison had children under 18 years of age. 64% of these mothers lived with their children before prison compared to 44% of fathers. While this is a pretty big difference, the overall magnitude of the impact of imprisonment isn't close. These are so many more fathers in prison than mothers in prison. One possibility is that mothers who fear losing custody will do anything they can to keep clean and get out quickly, and this focuses them more on doing their time quietly than fighting abuse. Sexual assault is another potential issue that may affect female prisoners more than males. In a yeah, in a previous survey of former prisoners from 2008, 10.5% of females reported prisoner on prisoner sexual assaults compared to 2.7% of males. Staff on prisoner sexual assault was also more commonly reported by females, that's 2.5% compared to males, 1.1%. We are skeptical of these numbers, especially since the taboo against reporting sexual assault is even greater for males, and so it's hard to say if these statistics represent a meaningful difference between the experience in women and men's prisons. Even if it does, we wouldn't expect this abuse to lead females away from political activism. So, the Noble Young Lord Party encouraged women to get involved with political activism, as well as the trans woman. But it is perhaps an issue we need to expose more often to address the large portion of women who are facing this abuse. The path forward, it is important to connect our political line with our strategy and tactics and engage in the scientific process of developing that line as we learn from our practice. While in this article, we have focused on facilities for women and organizing of females behind bars. This is a bigger question on how we mobilize females on the streets to join our revolutionary struggle for the Noble Young Lords Party. We are fighting against class, nation, and gender oppression on a global scale. This battle requires uniting all who can be united. Around the world, we have examples of women joining struggles of national liberation. We have trans women joining the struggle for national liberation. So therefore, in society, we are asking women, trans women, to take up arms for the revolutionary liberation with the Noble Young Lords Party, taking up leadership in communist organizations and historically in leadership positions in communist China. So while we see the national liberation struggle as principle at this point in history, we cannot neglect the gender contradictions both in the general fight against imperialism and in our own political practice. Alright, punto final. Alright, so basically that's on behalf of Noble Young Lords Party and Maoist International Movement to shine light on the women who are incarcerated and also the trans women who are incarcerated, that the abuse that they're facing, the oppression, and also that they're joining the revolutionary struggle, and also to get more people to become aware of the struggle of women and trans women that are incarcerated. So that's why they also want more women and trans women to be with the Noble Young Lords Party and also with the United Struggles within. And with that said, revolutionary salute, Malik Alim, the New York State Chairman for the Noble Young Lords Party. Gotta keep it noble, baby. Stay nobility. One Lord, one people. Stay noble. Noble Young Lords Party. Revolutionary salute.